So welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success series of interviews where we discuss with the local business leaders, their backgrounds, their successes and challenges and what really drives them forward. And today I'm delighted to have with us Jonathan Straight, who's a plural non-executive director, an entrepreneur and a photographer. So firstly, welcome, Jonathan. Thanks so much for joining us. And if you'd like to introduce yourself to the audience, that would be wonderful.
Thanks, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm Jonathan. I'm probably best known for Straight PLC, which was, and indeed still is, the UK's biggest supplier of recycling containers. I founded that in 1993 and I sold it in 2014. So that was a very interesting 21-year journey. Wow. And since then, I've got involved in all sorts of things. I'm a director at the Tetley, which is a contemporary art gallery and learning space in Leeds. I'm a trustee at Waste Aid, which develops recycling programs in sub-Saharan Africa and other developing parts of the world. I'm retained by a company called Surplus Group, who rescue food that's going to go to waste. And people can buy that through the Approved Food website. Really cheap food, but it's really good quality. It just happens to be close to or even past its best before date. I have my own little startup called the Lupin Company. We sell sweet Australian lupin, which is a gluten-free vegan superfood, very versatile, very healthy. And I do lots of photography projects. So I'm a busy man.
Goodness, you very much are a busy man. That's wonderful. So, and obviously your background in waste and recycling. Tell me a little bit more how you got into that. Was that something that you had an interest in from an early stage?
Well, I wouldn't say I was interested in that specifically, but I was very interested in the environment and, you know, the potential damage we were doing to it. And remember, this is the 1980s. It was on the agenda then as it is now. And I found myself between roles. I'd done a bit of selling in menswear, commercial menswear, and I'd done a bit of marketing in the fitted bedroom industry. So I'd learned quite a lot of skills, and I found myself between roles. And I discovered this thing called recycling. I read a sentence in a book which changed my life. I mean, you don't often hear this, but it said we pay to bury our waste in holes in the ground, and yet the material we bury has a value, so we pay for it twice. And I thought, hang on, if I can solve this problem, maybe I'll make a bit of money, and maybe I'll also make a great big social contribution too. So I started to explore ways in which I could help. I ended up volunteering at a little consultancy called Save Waste and Prosper in Leeds. And they eventually started paying me because I was quite useful to them. Through them, I got involved with a plastics producer called Paxton. I did a bit of work for them. I ended up working full-time for them for a couple of years. And then when they pulled the plug in 1993, I said, look, can I go out and sell these products on my own as your agent? And initially they said no, but after a bit of badgering and persuasion, they agreed on a no-risk basis that I could go out and do that. And that was the beginning of my business, which became a public company 10 years later. And, you know, was a huge success, built to 30 million turnover, a factory, 150 staff, and led pretty much every market it was in for all the years I ran it.
Fantastic. Sounds absolutely fantastic. So, I suppose going back to right at the start, what did you want to be when you were younger? What were your plans when you grew up?
Well, funnily enough, I always wanted to be in business. My late father was a professional; he was a doctor.
Yeah.
And I think he struggled a bit financially. I mean, funny to say, but the field of medicine he was in, which was psychiatry. I mean, you know, interesting upbringing with a father as a psychiatrist and a child psychiatrist at that. I didn't feel that we were exactly awash with cash, and I felt that people whose families had businesses did better. So I was always interested in being in business. I didn't envisage being in this particular business, and I didn't envisage it being quite as successful as it was, but I always had a big interest in business. And when we were actually offered at age 16 a business studies A level as a choice for the first year, it was available. I was first in the queue, and it actually was the high point of my education, and remains the only formal business education I ever had.
Wowzers. That's phenomenal. I often meet entrepreneurial people, and there is this sort of, I didn't know quite what I wanted, but I knew I wanted to be in business, if you like. I know our founder, Brad Sugars, is the founder of Action Coach. He always tells a story that he said he thought he became an entrepreneur. Let me get it right. Entrepreneur at 7 when he sold his Christmas presents to his brothers. But then he said he became a true entrepreneur at 8 when he started to rent his Christmas presents to his brothers, because he got the presents back.
An early adopter of the circular economy.
Yes. Yes. I'll mention that to him when I see him. Actually, I love that. So obviously a very, very interesting and colourful career. What would you say are some of the biggest issues and challenges you've had to overcome?
It's been hard to get good people. I think that's probably been the biggest challenge. And obviously when you've got good people, you've got to keep hold of them. But you've also got to know when somebody's pushing you too far, and there's a fine balance here between somebody, I don't think anybody is bigger than the business, but also people can be very important to a business. And I think I also learned that a business can outgrow certain individuals. So there are people who can be very important at a certain stage, but then as the business reaches another milestone or another size, they cease to be quite as useful, and you have to be able to recognize that. So HR, I think, was one big issue. I think in terms of the problems we had, there were two big problems through my career. One was a supply chain issue. You imagine that you can do anything. You imagine that you can supply as much of a product as anybody's going to want, and then there'll come a day when you realize actually you can't. And that's quite a difficult thing to come to terms with, that actually what you've created has boundaries and walls, and it's not, it's not the invincible, thing you might have imagined. And the other problem we had was a financial problem with banks. And, you think banks are your friend, and the days and the times that they're your friend is when you don't need them. And when you do need them, they're not your friend at all. And I frankly went through some nonsense with our bankers that I still find hard to believe. They literally took over every element of what we were doing. We were working for them. We weren't working for anybody else for a period of time. We got through it, but certainly I will be very wary to borrow money from a bank ever again.
Right. Interesting. And what would you say some of the biggest learnings you've had? Obviously, you talked a little bit about the people side, but what have you learned about business and life, I guess?
Well, I suppose if you don't try it, you're never going to know if it's worked or not. And I think you've got to have the faith in your own abilities to be able to say, well, this is what I think I'm going to do, and I'm just going to get on and do it. And there will be people who say, what a great idea, and then the people who say, what a stupid idea. But at the end of the day, you've got to prove it to yourself, and then prove it to the detractors. The detractors don't really matter. It's only really you that matters. In terms of what I've learned about myself, I'm a very creative person. I don't think I knew that before I started. And I can view the whole of the business I built as a giant work of art, if you like, because that really, to me, is what it is. It was a massive process of creativity. I've learned I can solve problems. I've got a sort of very lateral thinking mind, and I can see things in a slightly different way, maybe to the mainstream. And the other thing I've learned about myself is I can actually surprise myself. I can look back and go, wow, did I really do that? Well, yeah, I did. I floated a company on the stock market. Everybody said, you can't do that. Don't be stupid. Why would you want to do that? That is what I'm going to do. And I did it.
That's wonderful. I often find entrepreneurial people spend a lot of time looking at what they haven't achieved yet, and not enough looking at what they have. And I think it's great to hear that you have been able to swivel back and go, actually, we've done this, because in the tough times, it's important that we've got something to fall back on about our success is not just focus on the challenges ahead. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think you raise a very, very, very valid point, and I think there's a lot to be grateful for. But of course, there are those sort of lonely days where you think, I'm a very tough judge of myself, and it can, there can be times where you think, well, what have I done? And I haven't really achieved a great deal. But I suppose it's useful to write a list and say, well, actually, you did do X, Y, and Z, and these things were great achievements.
Brilliant, brilliant. So you may be aware we're a coaching organisation. I wonder who would you say is the best coach you've had in business or life in general?
Well, I've not really. Actually, I do have a formal coach now. I have a lady who I see every sort of 3 months or so just to evaluate where I'm up to. But through my career, there was none of that. And I suppose when I appointed my board of non-execs when I floated the business, that was as near as I got. But I think back to early in my career, and a chap who sadly passed away quite recently called Nigel Rush, who was sales director at Strachan Bedrooms when I worked there in my early 20s, and he was a huge influence on me. He knew exactly where he was going, and he knew exactly what he needed to do to get there. He had absolute clarity of vision, and it was taken backwards from where we needed to be in a given week to how many phone calls we needed to answer or make in order to achieve that amount of business. And I just thought this clarity of vision is something that's stuck with me. Very sadly, he's not with us anymore, but taught me a lot of great lessons about business.
Brilliant. And have you picked up, or do you use any particular quotes or sayings that you fall back on a regular basis?
Well, I wouldn't say there are any I fall back on, although I used to have one in my Filofax in the 1980s, which said something like, my job description is the beginning of my responsibilities and not the extent of them, which I thought was quite good. But I do like, I like a lot of Walt Disney quotes. If you can dream it, you can do it. Or when you're curious, you find lots of interesting things to do. I think those are very good. And I also like Albert Einstein, particularly everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will spend its whole life thinking it's stupid. And I think there's a lot of sense in that. I think, we have to recognize the inherent abilities in everybody. Sometimes we give people the wrong things to do. But it's finding the right things for them to do. And I've employed people before without really having any clear idea of what they were going to do, just because I knew they were highly skilled and highly qualified and would add to the organization, and I just sort of dropped them in and let them find their way, and that can work too. Brilliant.
I think Einstein also said, I love the one that talking about systems and things, was I think if you can't explain to a 6-year-old, then you don't understand it yourself.
I think that's very true.
I think it's great for simplicity, isn't it? It's like, and it's so easy to overcomplicate things sometimes, for no purpose whatsoever.
Well, I think we assume that things, if things are complicated, then competitors can't copy them, and they're too difficult for other people to unravel. Maybe there's an element of truth in that, but I think ultimately things have got to be, in essence, very simple. Otherwise, they're prone to failing and not working out.
Yes. Completely agree with that. So you obviously got lots of things going on. I'm just interested to know what the future looks like for you. What are them, and what potential main challenges are you facing moving forward?
Well, I hope the future will be varied, because I like doing different things every day. It keeps my mind active, and it keeps me interested in what I'm doing. So I'm very fortunate that I have creative projects to do. So I produce books of photography, and I tend to do those for charities. So I give them my time.
Yeah.
Often they cover some of my expenses, which is very nice. And they then get a product which they can use to promote their cause, and I get an audience for my work, which is a win-win. And then there's my commercial work, which at the moment is around surplus food. I am quite keen to do something in the public sector space there. That's quite hard to break into.
Yeah.
But once you are in, it's much easier to get other roles. So I continue to apply for things that look interesting and continue to be hopeful that there will be an opportunity there. I obviously give a lot of my time to charities. Obviously the Tetley is a voluntary role, Waystate a voluntary role. I'm also involved with a literary festival called Millim in North Leeds, which pivoted to online in lockdown. We now do one a week. I interview an author or a historian, and we have an audience from all over the world. And that's great because I have to read a lot of books, but when I'm reading the book, I know I'm going to get to chat to the author, which puts a whole different spin on it. And then there's my own little startups, which are doing okay. So lots and lots of different things to keep me occupied. And I think I'm probably working harder than I ever did, but it's actually much more rewarding.
Brilliant. It sounds like I love the quote. If you love what you do, then you never do a day's work in your life. So it feels like that might fit with you to some extent.
I think there is, there was a difference at one time between what you might call work and what you might call play.
Yeah.
Now the difference is what gets paid and what doesn't get paid. But I don't really think of it in those terms. I do what I do. And if I get paid for it, great. And if I don't get paid for it, well, fine. It's still worth doing, and it's still rewarding and fulfilling. So there's been a blurring of activity. So I think, yeah, you hit the nail on the head with what you said.
Love it. No, it sounds very, very interesting, very exciting. So I'm interested to know what you might say to anyone thinking of going into business right now.
Well, I think you just have to get up and do it. And the suggestion that everything's been done is complete nonsense. If you look at the biggest companies on the planet, they weren't here quite recently.
Yeah.
People have an opportunity now to do things themselves. You can achieve a huge amount yourself. So, for example, with my little startup, well, I can give an artist a piece of work to do, or I can do it myself because I've got the tools here. I can promote myself with social media. I can create my own videos. I can create my own graphics. I can create my own packaging. I can do my own branding. I can bring in people if I want to, and that's fine. But the ability to actually conceive something and turn it into reality from a desk in a bedroom is there in a way it's never been before. And it's a mind-blowing opportunity. And people wanting to go into business should grasp it with both hands. The other thing, of course, is because of the nature of this, you can do it on the side. You don't have to throw in your job. You don't have to take a huge financial risk until you can see that it's got potential to pay off. But that said, there's a lot of money slushing around and a lot of people prepared to invest in a good idea in a way that there really wasn't when I started.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think times are good for people.
Brilliant. And if you had to do it all again, start again, is there anything that you do differently?
Probably. I'd probably look out for myself a bit more, because my mindset was always to put the company first.
Right.
And I did that over and above my own physical and mental health and my own financial health, even. And whilst that was brilliant for the business, I'm not sure it was that clever for me. And the other thing I would do is make sure that contracts were very tight, and make sure that if I was sharing sensitive information with anybody, there was a signed NDA, because a lot of people took advantage of the fact that You know, we haven't sort of been belt and braces with them,
Right.
and we ended up with a lot of competitors that we perhaps could have avoided. So those,
Right.
I think, are the two things I would do differently.
And finally, is there any advice you'd give to an 18-year-old you if you could?
Make hay while the sun shines, because it doesn't always shine.
I love that. That's on a day like this, especially. That's a great advice.
Sure.
Well, Jonathan, that seems to have whizzed by, but thank you so much for your time today. That's been really fascinating. Is there any other final thoughts that you have about anything really? I mean, you're fascinating, obviously, both career to date, but obviously the future as well. Is there any sort of thoughts that you have on business or life?
Well, I think a lot of people talk about problems and challenges and you know, hurdles, but you have to view any challenge as a potential opportunity.
Yes.
If something is there that looks like a problem, it means a lot of other people are seeing it as a problem, and if you can see a way around it or a way to capitalize on it, then all the better. And I think just keeping that positive mindset is a good thing. You know, if we lost a tender, we didn't dwell on it for weeks and weeks. We looked at where we'd gone wrong. We quickly assessed whether there was any scope for challenge, and otherwise we dusted ourselves down, we took the learning and we moved on. And as a result of that mindset, we actually became experts in procurement law, and we ended up calling the shots in a lot of exercises because the people doing the buying were not as knowledgeable as us. So there are always ways to do it better. And, you know, candidly, we had tenders pulled, we had tenders stopped, we had things reissued and done again. We were in charge because we could see where people were bending the rules or breaking the rules. And if the rule bending was to our advantage, we'd keep very quiet. But if it wasn't, we'd make a lot of noise.
Brilliant. No, I love that. I was told a long time ago that in one of the Chinese dialects, I think it's the symbol for challenge has two parts, one for problem but one for opportunity. And I think that's great. I absolutely align with what you've said. Whenever I work with somebody, they say, well, this is a problem in the industry. Brilliant. Okay, so there's an opportunity in the industry too. How do we solve that, and how do we make that to our advantage? Blimey. Wonderful. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for your time today. Clearly a very, very busy man, so I really appreciate that. And thanks for taking part. And I'm sure you'll inspire some current and future entrepreneurs.
Let's hope so. Nice to be with you.
Thank you.